Welcome back to Flashpoint. We continue our conversation with Professor Susan Roberts and Scott Huffman. All right, Scott, how do you feel like, talking about issues now, how inflation will end up playing into this, all these races?
Inflation is still kind of overarching above all of these races. We thought that abortion was going to be, far more important, the thing that's most talked about. And it seems that, in the media and us talking heads, we do seem to wonder how much turnout, especially among moderate women, the issue of abortion is going to be driving after the Dobbs decision. But when voters are answering polls, when they say what are the most important issues, it is still inflation and it is still the economy. And it's not just how it hits their pocketbooks. Most voters are sociotropic voters, meaning they look at sort of how it hits everybody, even if their pocketbook is feeling safe. And as long as we have inflation and it looks like the Fed is hiking interest rates again, people are going to feel that economically, then that is going to remain the overarching issue. I don't see anything changing in the next week, although I do expect Democrats to put out a big push about the abortion issue to try and spur turnout in Democratic districts nationally.
Well, and may I take a shot at that? I think the one of the differences is Kavanaugh, the confirmation occurred in October the 6th, and the leak and Dobbs came out in June. And I think the Democrats have said they've maybe peaked too soon. And that's something that I think that for many people, we have seen that kind of subside. You can't, abortion is more long-term, and the price you pay at the pump and for groceries is immediate. And that's why I think one of the reasons it's been displaced, and all the things that have, been done to try to get it back in the headlines don't seem to have worked. But the Democrats, I think I read that they spent half of their money in October on ads talking about access to abortion. And is that messaging one that can get them a victory? I'm hesitant to say that it will.
What do you think it is? It's just that we as Americans and voters have notoriously short attention spans?
Well, I think part of it is, there's some long-term attention span in terms of the New York Times Siena poll that said, people are having threat to democracy as their number 2 issue. Now, that's long-term, but also, I read that, yes, it's they see it as a priority, but they're not going to use it in their calculus to cast a vote.
Scott, she mentioned threat to democracy. There's a lot more at stake here than just conservative versus liberal in this race. As somebody who studies this, I don't want to be alarmist, but how do you size up this election and what happens after Tuesday?
Well, one of the things that's going to happen, I think, is no matter who ends up with control of Congress, the lame duck Congress, controlled by Democrats, is going to pass the act that will protect the count on the next January 6, 2025. So the real issue, instead of there being another January 6, 2025, it'll actually be in December. And if there's going to be attempts to usurp the vote, it's going to come in all 50 states when the Electoral College votes are tallied in the states. So I think we're actually going to face something strategically different for the 2024 election and something different on January 6, 2025. I think the potential attacks on democracy will come in December in the states where those Electoral College tallies are taking place. And that is going to, the question is, will that be sort of protected by the incoming Congress if it's Republican controlled?
How did we get to this point of the situation you all have just laid out for us, compared to a few years ago arguing about just the simple size of government?
Well, I think there's been a steady decline in trust in government, and there's been really more focus placed on how do you think the country's doing. And I think that's been looking, people are really saying the country's not doing very well. That doesn't have to be framed or primed. I think they know if the economy's going well. Biden faces low approval. It's not quite the same thing as the Trump initial Trump approval, but they're along the same lines. And I think it's really just trust in the government, trust in institutions, feeling as if people listen to you. That's still out there. The really one of the impetuses behind Trump's victory. So I think some of it is past elections, trust in institutions, the direction of the country, and do you want the Democrats to be in control, that generic ballot? And that's really swung more from the Democrats to the Republicans.
I think Susan's absolutely right. The one thing I would add to that is that all of those things have caused the polarization to get that much worse. And not only is trust in government down, as Susan pointed out, belief that the other side is actively undermining the country. Both sides now look at the opposite side, not just as someone with different ideas, but as an enemy and as an existential threat. And to the degree that you think the other side threatens the very existence of the country, then you're going to be willing to push as hard as it takes to make sure your side wins, because the other side isn't just wrong in your mind, they're evil. And to the degree that we have that level of polarization among some folks, and we do, we're just going to see this type of venomous politics continue.
Final question, what's the solution to that?
Scott, you go first.
Well, you know, everybody talks about, can we have a third party of moderates come up? And there is a built-in part of the Constitution, and this is called Duverger's law, that the way our system is designed, the way our founders designed the system, it accidentally, and it is an accident, always results in a two-party system. So our system is inherently biased against a third party coming up. So the idea that some moderates are going to come in and be able to rise up and take over, that's not how things are going to work. I think we are in a pendulum swing right now. I think it may get worse before it gets better, but there's always the hope that the pendulum will swing back and the coalitions that make up the party will begin shifting. And that's where we're going to have hope for the future, but not the soon future.
Yes, and I think that, you know, there's leadership from the top and there's rhetoric from the top. And unfortunately, I think President Biden made a speech about the danger of MAGA, and then he turned around and made a speech about, you know, let's get together, let's speak with one voice about the future of democracy. And I'm not sure that that's going to be a message that is going to resonate in this election, and maybe not. I can't see it changing in 2024.
All right, Susan Roberts, Scott Huffman, thank you both. We'll get the latest from Washington, D.C. coming up right after this on Flashpoint.